You deserved it. My sister's smirk burned into me as I lay broken at the bottom of the hospital stairs. My ribs screamed, my vision blurred, and still my parents rushed past me to comfort her. "It was an accident, right, Kayla?" They whispered as if her word alone could rewrite the truth. I couldn't speak through the pain, but the hospital security camera had already seen what they refused to see. The head nurse had pressed record, her eyes narrowing, knowing this wasn't an accident at all, and that moment changed everything. My name is Michael, and this is my story. I never thought I'd be forced to fight my own family just to prove the truth. Before I share my story, I'd love to know you are here with me and listening to me. Comment hi below or tell me where you're from. I love hearing how far my story reaches. Sometimes knowing someone is there makes all the difference. Thank you. And now, let me tell you everything. And if my story touches you, please consider subscribing to this channel. Every story I share comes from a place of pain and hope. And your support means I don't have to carry this alone. You deserved it. Kayla's voice was sugar over glass, the kind of sweetness that slices. I lay at the bottom of the stairwell, breath snagging on busted ribs, a ringing in my ears, drowning out the hospital's alarms. My parents rushed past me to gather her up, hands on her shoulders, soothing, asking, "It was an accident, right?" As if her answer could rewrite gravity. I mouthed words that didn't make it past the pain. And somewhere above us, a red light blinked on security, because the head nurse had already pressed record. 2 hours earlier, I'd been at my grandmother's bedside, the room warm with the plastic hiss of oxygen, the soft tick of the wall clock. I told her about the promotion, how it didn't feel like winning so much as finally catching up to myself. She squeezed my hand with the papery strength of someone who'd outlived her critics. Then Kayla drifted in perfume, first apology, last all teeth and followers and brand deals. My mother angled herself toward Kayla like a flower toward a lamp. I watched my sister ease a drawer closed by my grandmother's bed, too quick, too practiced, and felt the familiar heat of caution rise up my throat. I said nothing. My grandmother's smile trembled with effort, and I wasn't going to steal whatever calm she had left. We stepped into the hall, and the air turned colder. My mother's first sentence was a critique dressed like concern. "That jacket reads small market," she said, tapping a loose thread that wasn't there. Kayla laughed, said, "Director title thrift store taste, the way she used to say tag your it before shoving me into a wall." I hit the elevator button, then let it time out and headed for the stairs. The sound of my sister's heels followed in the stairwell. The building's heartbeat was louder fans, vents, the hollow echo of our footsteps. Kayla's voice dropped into its favorite register, the one meant for just us. "You think you're getting the lake house?" she said, smile gone. "You think you can pull strings with Grandma and I won't see it. You've been campaigning for years. I've been visiting her," I said. "You should try it sometime without a camera." "You're not the hero," she hissed, chin lifting. "You're the reason I have to fight for everything. Dad says you weaponize her guilt." "That's not true." I felt the railing under my palm, cold real. "You're in trouble, Kayla. You've been in trouble. Whatever you took from her drawer, put it back." She took a step closer. The stairwell smelled like bleach and rain-soaked concrete. "You're not taking anything else from me," she said, and then her hand was flat between my shoulder blades, all force and intention. The world-tilted stairs turned into a chyron of edges, each impact a flash of white. When I landed, everything slowed except my lungs, which were suddenly too small. Kayla's face hovered above me, perfect and distant. "You deserved it," she said softly, like a gift just for me. Footsteps thudded. My parents arrived in a blur. My father's first hand went not to me, but to Kayla's elbow. My mother framed her daughter's face with both palms. "It was an accident, right?" she repeated, coaxing. Kayla blinked practiced panic. I tried to say her name and swallowed fire. a siren inside the building code in progress. Then the head nurse, Karen Mitchell, cut through the chaos with the choreography of someone who decides first and justifies later. Back up, she told my parents' voice level. Let us work. Hands stabilized my neck. Oxygen pushed cool night into my mouth. A board lifted beneath me. Over Karen Mitchell's shoulder, I saw a small dome camera at the landing. It stared down, impartial and patient. In the emergency bay, the ceiling rolled past like a film strip. Trapeze bars of fluorescent light rectangles of doubt framed by ductwork. CT X-ray. The language of impact rib fractures left wrist concussion. Morphine tugged at all my edges. I told Karen maybe I told the room that Kayla pushed me. I think I also said the part about the drawer, about something missing that didn't belong to her. The words caught on the wiring in my mouth. Karen Mitchell stayed until the room settled. She wasn't warm or cold. She was precise. She confirmed my name, then left with a promise that sounded nothing like a promise and everything like a plan. In the staff office, she would open the security console with 2 sign-ins, not 1. She would snapshot the stairwell feeds at 2148 through 0218, copy them to a mirrored drive document, a legal hold with timestamps that would survive a committee. She would tag the door sensor logs for the stairwell access and cross-check them with staff badge swipes recorded automatically by the building system. She would make 2 redundant copies because hospitals learn the hard way that truth gets misplaced. By the time I drifted up again, the room was dim and humming. My parents were gone. Kayla was somewhere rehearsing a version of Mercy. Karen Mitchell stood at the foot of my bed, the glow of the vitals monitor slicing her face into halves. "You'll be sore when you sleep and angrier when you wake," she said. "We've preserved what we need." Then, almost as an afterthought, she added, "Someone from administration just sent a request to pull last hour's footage for archive storage. We've already locked it, but that was fast." Outside, rain threaded the windows. Inside, a red light on a camera kept its quiet vigil. I closed my eyes and saw it again. A hand between my shoulders, the sudden absence beneath my feet. The camera had seen it too. For the first time that night, the fear paused long enough to make space for something else. Not relief, not yet. Just a stubborn, steadying no. Sleep came in shards. Each time I surfaced, the hospital remade itself around me. Curtain beeps the bite of air conditioning, and then the past surfed back, equal parts memory and indictment. I was 10 again, staring at a cake meant for me, until my mother slid a second name in green icing along the bottom, and Kayla as if the sugar could carry the weight of fairness. Later, when I opened the box to show off the balsa wood plane I'd built, its wing was already snapped. Kayla stood beside the table with her hands behind her back. My father frowned at me for making a scene. "Accidents happen," he said. The phrase took root like a weed. In high school, I spent nights soldering circuits for a science fair, while Kayla learned how to hold a smile at 3/4 angle. When I won state, my parents nodded and asked me about backup plans. When Kayla won a county pageant, there were balloons and a catered sheet cake and a photographer my mother had found who could make the lighting kinder. On the drive home, I promised myself I wouldn't keep score. The trick of childhood is believing the game isn't fixed. College didn't change the math. I worked mornings unloading boxes and nights closing a coffee shop with hands that smelled like cardboard and espresso. My parents sent me screenshots of the SUV they were considering for Kayla so she could get to her classes safely. At a family counseling session, my mother insisted on the therapist with gentle eyes suggested sibling rivalry. Kayla cried with the perfect timing of a metronome. I left that room understanding that definitions were elastic and would be stretched to fit her. The accidents matured as we did. The night before a scholarship presentation, a kettle tipped and scalding water crawled down my forearm like a living thing. Kayla's gasp was the exact right pitch. When my laptop died, 2 hours before a final draft was due, she was the one who discovered the coffee spreading in an impossible crescent under the keyboard. "You're so clumsy," she said like a prayer. In our neighborhood, a child fell near the curb while Kayla was pet-sitting. My parents handled it, which meant it disappeared. In those years, Aunt Diane existed like a lighthouse off a coast I couldn't afford to visit. She said things other adults didn't say. Don't normalize cruelty. Don't let other people rename your pain. She lived in Eugene in a house with windows that looked like they were made to forgive. Sometimes she showed up at my games without announcing herself. Sometimes she called just to hear me breathe and say it counted. Back in the hospital, the fluorescent lights tucked me into the present. I checked my phone with a hand that felt like borrowed equipment. There were messages I didn't open, mother, father, unknown numbers that smelled like damage control. There was one from Aunt Diane. "You up?" It read. Barely. I typed with my right thumb. She didn't waste sentences. How bad? Bad enough to be honest, I wrote. We sat under the weight of that for a minute. Then another text came through a photo that loaded line by deliberate line the way dial-up used to unspool summers. It was a still frame, grainy, time-stamped, unflattering to the truth my family had cared about the living room at my 10th birthday. The table with the plain Kayla in the left frame. In the second, it captured her face wasn't the face she wore for grown-ups. Her hand was mid-swing. The wing of my plane was mid-break. In the doorway, a sliver of my mother's dress entered the frame seconds too late to see anything but aftermath. Diane's message followed. Your uncle digitized some old tapes. This one looked familiar. Thought you should have it. A strange, quiet relief ran through me. Not because it erased the hurt, but because it named it. My whole life evidence had arrived late or not at all. Here was something that outran the official story. Not a memory with its soft edges, a picture with corners. I stared at the pixelated version of my sister and thought about the camera in the stairwell, how it didn't care about anyone's reputation, how it didn't know our family's preferred narrative about gravity. The room's shadows had shifted. A nurse checked vitals and asked about pain, and I told her manageable, which meant the truths hurt more than the bones. When she left, I scrolled back to our grandmother in my head to the drawer. I'd seen Kayla close to the way my mother's body had formed a wall around my sister in the stairwell. If small lies were lacquered over so carefully, what would they do to a big one? My phone buzzed again. Another photo from Diane. This one of the tape itself, black plastic, a label in my father's neat print Michael 10th party. Proof that the story had never belonged wholly to those who told it the loudest. Proof that some part of me had been right to keep insisting on a version of events that sounded ungenerous to people who benefited from generosity. Don't normalize cruelty, Diane had said. I typed before I could overthink it. I need the original I wrote. Can you get it to me? Already on my desk, she replied. I'll drive it up in the morning. Across the room, a monitor ticked off the seconds like a metronome learning a new tempo. I lay there listening to my own breathing and to the rain sawing at the city, and to the thin electronic chorus that keeps hospitals awake. Somewhere on another floor, a drawer held one fewer ring than it had yesterday. Somewhere inside an office, a request to archive footage of me falling was sitting in someone's inbox, and Karen Mitchell had already put a lock against it. On my screen, a frozen frame from a different year held my sister mid-swing. The past had always been staging this. I realized a collision between what happened and what was allowed to be said. Now, finally, there were cameras in both directions. Morning at Portland General arrived with gray light and coffee breath. My parents appeared beside my bed holding a manila folder like it was medicine. Inside a form labeled Incident as Accident, a neat line for my signature. This keeps insurance clean, my father said. My mother added it spares the family. Kayla stood behind them in a soft sweater and damp eyes. "I only tried to hold you back," she whispered. "I set the pen aside. I'm not signing." The room thinned. My mother's smile cracked. "Don't make a spectacle." Kayla's breath hitched, practiced. Before the performance could deepen, Nurse Karen Mitchell stepped in with her own folder and a voice designed for audits. "I need a few minutes with the patient." When the door closed, Karen laid out what she'd done. Overnight, she placed a legal hold on the stairwell cameras from 7 to 5, the 7th floor hall, the elevator banks, the exit door sensors, and the doorway camera outside my grandmother's room. She'd notified security and administration in writing. Any move or deletion would trigger a report and require a court order. "Tell me what you remember," she said, pen hovering. I told her about the shove, the sentence. "You deserved it." The drawer. I saw Kayla close too fast. "Then we verify," Karen said. With my permission, she wheeled me to my grandmother. Margaret looked small but steady. "Something's gone," she said before we asked. "My ring." Back at the nurse's station, Karen pulled up the doorway feed. The angle didn't show the drawer's interior, but it caught Kayla's shoulder, her hand dipping the quick disappearance of a small object into her bag. No audio, just motion precise as a confession. Karen printed the frame, logged the time code, and added it to a chain of custody sheet already stamped with my case number. My phone buzzed a forwarded email showing an admin request to archive last hour's stairwell footage for privacy. Next to it, Karen's declined, citing legal hold and potential evidence preservation. Minutes later, the same office tried a softer phrasing. Declined again. We've also mirrored the stairwell footage to a backup server and saved an encrypted copy. Karen said 2 credentials required to open. They'll have to go through court. My parents returned for another pass. "No one is taking sides," my mother said, which always meant they were. "Protect your sister," my father said, which always meant protect the story. Kayla stared at the floor. "You tripped," she told the tile. I didn't argue. I wrote a clean statement of the night, the time we left the room, the words on the landing, the shove, the ring, the pain. When my hand shook, Karen studied the page, not me. By afternoon, a nurse updated my chart. I updated my resolve. For the first time, I trusted evidence more than peace. Outside, rain pressed the city flat. Inside, a red camera light continued its quiet work. I dozed and woke to a voicemail from an unfamiliar number. A man's voice, careful, tired. "Michael, this is Adam Brooks. We haven't met. I have messages and photos. She did the same to me. If you want them, I'll bring everything." He left a time in a cafe around the corner. My heart pounded against the brace on my ribs. Truth. It turned out had witnesses I'd never counted. I looked at Karen Mitchell's folder emails logs, the printed still of Kayla's hand, and then at the unsigned form on my tray. The distance between them felt like a border I should have crossed years ago. I slid the pen farther away and closed my eyes. Somewhere, someone was already trying to pull the file. Somewhere else, someone had pressed record. 3 days later, I met Adam Brooks at a cafe that smelled like steamed milk and wet coats. He arrived with a plain envelope and a face that expected not to be believed. "I don't want trouble," he said, sitting. "I just don't want anyone else hurt." Inside the envelope were Prince's texts from Kayla that started sugary and turned serrated. A photo of a bruise near his temple in the shape of a bottle's base, an email to his boss explaining a missed shift after a fight. He slid over a flash drive with the digital files. At a bar once, she begged me to help wipe the camera stills. He said her face couldn't be in another scene. When I wouldn't, she promised I'd regret it. Weeks later, she shoved me in our stairwell. I thanked him, which felt too small for the weight on the table. He shook his head. I should have said something sooner. We both stared at the envelope like it might stand up and testify for us. Back at the hospital, my parents were in the lounge, faces lit by a news crawl. I told them about Adam's evidence. My mother didn't blink. "He wants attention," she said. "People lie for money." My father muted the TV with a jab. "Stop dragging outsiders into family matters." I heard the old bargain behind the words, silence for belonging. "I'm done protecting lies," I said. "Then you're done with us," he replied. The quiet after that sentence had an echo. I called Diane from a bench in the courtyard, rain needling the hedges. She answered with the steadiness of someone who keeps her promises to small versions of you. I told her about Adam and the drive. "Good," she said. "Truth travels better in packs. Make 3 copies and store them apart. And think beyond the circle. There are always witnesses just off stage." I said I was tired. "Being honest is lighter," she said. "You just feel the weight at first." The next call found me. "Michael, this is April." "Lawson," a woman, said, voice tight. "My son broke his arm outside your parents' house 2 summers ago. He said Kayla shoved him because he got in the way of her photo. Your mother brought a check and a speech about teens misremembering. I filed a complaint, then withdrew it because I couldn't afford the fight. I kept copies. An email landed while we spoke. The report, the withdrawal, a note from urgent care, dates, signatures, the administrative shadow of a story we hadn't been allowed to finish. I forwarded everything to Karen Mitchell and to Diane. As dust collected under the awnings, a new text lit my screen from an unknown number. "Stop now, or you'll lose more than ribs." No punctuation, which somehow made it worse. I screenshotted and saved it to 2 folders, then showed Karen. She added it to the file labeling sender time and my location. "Fear leaves fingerprints," she said, and moved on to her next task, which was probably saving someone I'd never meet. That night, Karen called again, her voice sharper than usual. "You should hear this from me," she said. At 2:27 a.m., an administrator account tried to access and archive your stairwell footage. The system flagged the attempt because of the legal hold. It's logged, and I've escalated to legal insecurity. The original is locked. The mirrored and encrypted copies are safe. The back of my neck went cold. "So they're still trying," I said. "They are," she replied, "which means the evidence matters." I lay there watching the monitor graph my breathing. Adam's envelope, April's PDF, my grandmother's empty ring slot. The doorway still of Kayla's hand. The stairwell video blinking in some secure directory that a stranger was willing to risk their job to move. For years I had been told not to trust my own eyes. Now there were other eyes, camera lenses, witnesses, memories, nurses who wrote things down. The picture they drew was not complicated. It only felt that way because we had been trained to admire the frame. I turned my phone face down and let the room darken around me. Rain combed the windows. A hallway cart squeak-ached. A nurse laughed softly 2 rooms over. Fear moved through me and left space behind it. Somewhere in the building, someone would try again. Somewhere else, a red light would keep watching. In the morning, Diane would drive up with coffee and the old tape none of us were supposed to remember. And I would be here, ribs aching, holding a line I should have drawn a decade ago with proof that no longer needed my permission to be real. 10 days after the fall, my parents called for a family meeting. The setting was sterile, the conference room at the hospital reserved for patient families, but they spoke as if it were our living room. My father set down a stack of papers. "This is the withdrawal form," he said, voice clipped, rehearsed. "Sign it, Michael. End this. The family doesn't need its name dragged through mud." My mother folded her hands, gaze wet with practiced despair. "Please don't do this to your sister," she said. "If you go forward, you'll lose everything. No inheritance, no family, nothing." The ultimatum hung between us like smoke. I stared at the form, at the pen placed on top like a knife. My ribs still ached with every breath, but the sharper pain was in my chest. The demand to surrender truth for harmony. "No," I said, steady this time. "I won't sign." She pushed me. "You know it. The cameras saw it. The nurse documented it. Grandma Margaret wrote it. You can't erase that." Silence filled the room like water. My father's jaw worked. My mother broke first. She crumpled into sobs, clutching at me as though her grief could erase the words I'd just spoken. "Please," she wept. "Keep the peace. If this goes public, Kayla's career will be destroyed. Modeling contracts, endorsements, her whole future." I eased her hands off my arm. "Her future shouldn't rest on my silence," I said. That night, the storm broke online. Kayla appeared in a video on her channel, tears perfectly streaking her mascara, her voice trembling with conviction. "My brother," she whispered, "has been spreading lies about me. He's jealous. He wants to ruin everything I've worked for. I never heard him. I only tried to stop him from walking away, but now he wants to destroy me." Then came the campaign link of fundraiser for legal fees against false accusations. Donations poured in. Thousands of comments flooded beneath her video. Sympathy, encouragement, strangers promising to pray for her strength. My stomach nodded as I scrolled. They were buying it. Then something caught my eye. On her hand, as she lifted it to wipe her tears, was a ring. Emerald antique setting. My grandmother's ring, the one missing from her drawer. I replayed the clip 3 times, freezing the frame. It gleamed on her finger like a confession she didn't realize she'd made. My chest tightened, not from injury this time, but from rage and disbelief. Proof hidden in plain sight. Hours later, an unfamiliar number called. "Mr. Carter." The voice was brisk professional. "This is Katie Monroe with the Portland Herald. We've been following your sister's story online, but we've received a tip suggesting there's more. I'd like to hear your side." My throat went dry. Someone out there was doubting her. Someone saw the cracks. The next morning, my grandmother Margaret's attorney reached out. He had received a letter she had written herself. Despite her fragile health, she had dictated every word. In it, she described the years of favoritism, the countless times I had been dismissed, the cruelty covered as accidents. She confirmed she had changed her will not out of spite, but because she believed I was the one who had been wronged for too long. Reading those lines, I felt both vindicated and shattered. She had seen it all, and she had chosen to put it into writing. Her voice, frail but unwavering, was now evidence. The battle was no longer confined to stairwells and family rooms. It had spilled into feeds, into newsrooms, into court files. I looked around the hospital, the walls echoing with footsteps, and realized the fight had outgrown the confines of blood. It was public now. I was not alone in it. That knowledge steadied me even as fear whispered in the corners of my mind. That afternoon, Karen Mitchell came by with a message that shifted everything again. "Michael," she said, lowering her voice, "the backup footage is safe, and it's now with Detective Dana Collins. This is official. The investigation has begun." My pulse pounded not from panic, but from something that tasted almost like hope. For the first time in years, the truth was no longer mine alone to carry. 2 weeks after the fall, the hospital convened its internal review. A sterile conference room long table recorder blinking red. Across from me sat my parents, and beside them Kayla. Her hair was styled into effortless innocence, her expression crafted for sympathy. The investigator nodded for me to speak first. I told everything again. Her words in the stairwell, the push, the drawer, the missing ring. My voice shook at moments, but the details stayed clear. When it was Kayla's turn, she leaned forward, tears filling her eyes. "He's lying," she said. "He hates me. He wants Grandma's inheritance. I never pushed him." He slipped. My mother reached for her hand. "She's telling the truth," she said firmly. My father added, "My son has always been jealous. This is just another attempt to tarnish her." The door opened. Detective Dana Collins entered with Karen. Dana carried a laptop and a thin stack of files. Without preamble, she pressed play. The stairwell footage appeared grainy but undeniable. Kayla close behind me, the shove my body tumbling. The sound of my parents' breathing filled the silence. Then Dana played another clip, the hallway outside Grandma's room. It showed Kayla leaning in hand, darting into the drawer, pulling something small into her bag. My parents erupted. "That's been altered," my father shouted. "Dr. Red." My mother clutched her chest. "This is slander." Dana's eyes were cool. "These are secured files under legal hold. They were tampered with on the main server, but the backup copies remained intact thanks to Nurse Mitchell." Her gaze flicked briefly to Karen, who nodded. The room was a battlefield of truth and denial. Then came the witnesses. Adam Brooks sat stiffly, shoulders tight. He described the night she threw a bottle at him, the texts, the threats. He produced the photos and emails. Kayla shook her head violently, but the words on the screen didn't vanish. April Lawson followed via video call. She described the day her son's arm was broken, how Kayla had shoved him, how my parents had arrived with cash to silence her. The complaint forms and withdrawal letter filled the screen black and white against the chaos of denial. My parents whispered furiously to each other, their image of control cracking. By afternoon, the story had already leaked. Local news ran segments. Tech director claims assault by sister family drama at Portland General. Online hashtags spread, some painting me as a jealous liar, others dissecting the frame of the ring on Kayla's finger. Comment sections became war zones. Friends I hadn't heard from in years messaged to ask if I was okay. I wasn't sure of the answer. Back in Dana Collins's office, she closed the door and spoke quietly. We discovered one of the original videos on the hospital's main server was deleted, but thanks to Nurse Mitchell's foresight, we recovered the entire sequence. Without her, it would be your word against theirs. She slid the report across the desk. That attempt to erase his evidence itself, she added. There's more. Adam disclosed financial records showing Kayla borrowed large sums to cover gambling debts. In a fit of rage, she told him, "If my brother disappeared, I'd finally have everything. He's willing to testify." As if that weren't enough, my grandmother arrived unannounced. Frail but resolute, she handed Dana a sealed envelope. Inside, her updated will and a handwritten letter. It laid bare the favoritism, the harm done, the decades of silence forced upon me. She declared her intention to correct it. Dana read it in silence, then nodded. This will carry weight. Meanwhile, my parents escalated their fight. They hired a high-profile media lawyer who went on television declaring me a manipulator staging a fall to grab property. They fed the press stories of my supposed failures, painting me as unstable. It stung, but each lie only made the truth in Dana's files more precious. I left the office that evening with the city buzzing around me. Lights reflected on wet streets, voices echoing with half-truths. I felt like a man walking a tightrope every step between collapse and vindication. But I wasn't walking alone anymore. Karen, Diane, Adam. April, even my grandmother. They had added their weight to the scale. The next morning, Dana's call came. Her voice was clear, certain. "We have enough evidence," she said. "Your sister will be charged. We're moving to trial." I closed my eyes, let the words settle. It wasn't victory yet, but it was the threshold of something bigger. For the first time, the truth was not just whispered in stairwells or buried in drawers. It was heading into court where it would have to stand in daylight. The courthouse was heavy with silence as I stepped inside, the kind that settles in your chest and reminds you of every mistake you've ever carried. Monday morning in Multnomah County, Portland, and the benches were filled with faces both familiar and strange. Kayla sat across the aisle, her white blouse pressed and her eyes soft with practiced sorrow. My parents sat behind her loyal as ever, as if their devotion could erase the shove that had broken my ribs. The prosecutor read the charges assault in the second degree, and the words hung sharp in the air. The defense attorney rose, voice smooth, insisting, "This was nothing more than a family accident, a stumble misinterpreted." My pulse pounded as I rose to speak. I told them about the stairwell. The shove, the word she hissed, "You deserved it." I spoke of the years of accidents that weren't accidents, the way silence had always been forced on me to protect her. The defense attacked, accusing me of inventing this to gain my grandmother's inheritance. I studied myself and answered, "I didn't want property. I wanted peace. She took that from me." Then the screen lit, and the courtroom held its breath. The grainy footage filled the wall, Kayla behind me. The shove of my body crashing down the steps. Gasps broke out. My parents avoided the screen, my sister's face drained of color. The story they had rehearsed shattered in seconds. Karen Mitchell took the stand next, her voice steady, detailing the legal hold, the attempts to delete the logs she had preserved. Each word she spoke was another nail in the coffin of denial. Adam Brooks testified his bruises displayed his texts projected on the screen. April Lawson described her son's broken arm and the money that had silenced her. My grandmother's letter followed her words, quivering on the page, but unshakable in truth. She wrote a favoritism of my role as the scapegoat of her decision to amend her will because she could no longer stand the injustice. The courtroom was still as those words echoed. Then Kayla cracked. Her tears this time were not staged. She admitted to pushing me, begged for mercy, said it was stress, grief, fear. But the evidence was too heavy to be softened. When the defense tried one final move, presenting a doctor-read video of me tripping alone, the expert cut it down in seconds, exposing the edits. The judge's face hardened. Bail was set at $60,000. A no-contact order was issued. And then came the line that carried more weight than anything else. The court would investigate the attempted deletion of evidence. Someone had tried to bury the truth, and now that too would see light. When recess was called, my mother brushed past me and whispered, "If you keep going, you'll lose us all." I met her eyes but said nothing. For the first time, silence felt stronger than begging. Months passed before I breathed freely again. At Aunt Diane's house in Eugene, I relearned how to climb stairs without fear, how to let air fill my lungs without stabbing pain. Dr. Julia Hayes guided me through therapy, showing me that being the scapegoat was never who I was, only what I had been forced to play. Work came back slowly with Emily's constant encouragement and steady reminders that I wasn't alone. My grandmother joined us for a time, her laughter faint but real, her presence a reminder that not all family ties choke. For the first time, I felt surrounded by something that looked like love. Kayla faded into the distance, ordered into therapy, her career crumbling. She moved to Boise, supported financially, but not shielded by my parents anymore. I didn't reach out. The silence was its own protection. Then came a letter from my mother, her handwriting uneven. She admitted to years of blindness, confessed she had chosen image over truth, peace over justice. She asked to meet. Against instinct, I agreed. In a neutral cafe, we sat across from each other, her tears falling into her untouched coffee. I didn't forgive, but I listened. For me, that was enough. A year later, I returned to Portland General with a box of gifts for Karen Mitchell and her team. Standing in the stairwell, I felt no fear. The camera above blinked a witness that no longer threatened, but protected. The place that had broken me had also made me undeniable. At Diane's house, a sealed letter waited my grandmother's last gift. She had revised her will again, removing Kayla, reducing my parents' share, leaving most to me. But more than that, she wrote, "I leave you belief. I leave you trust. The rest is only money. At the end, the stairs made you fall, but they also lifted you into the light. Don't fear the dark anymore. I folded the letter and slipped it into my wallet. It was lighter than an emerald ring, but heavier than all the silence I had carried. That night I walked to the shore, the city lights trembling on the water, my lungs filling without pain. When I returned to the hospital weeks later, I paused at the glass doors. My reflection looked back at me whole steady. Behind me was the noise of a family that had tried to silence me. Ahead was a life I could shape myself. I stepped forward, whispering words meant only for me.